Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bow Hunter. I'm your host, Matty. Join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands. Searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting. Becoming a Bow Hunter is brought to you by Chief Dads. Chief Dads is my little program that I kickstarted at the start of this year or start of 2020, and really it's been an absolute gangbuster. It's been unreal to see the results that we've had with different dads from around the country. It's pretty much your nutrition encompassed with your training, as well as we really dive into lifestyle, and that's the biggest piece. Each week we touch on a new lifestyle piece, and we really train you to, out-train bad habits and really focus on what lifestyle habits are the best things for you to be doing, the best practices, and the things that give you the best return for not a lot of output. So that's what the program is all about. And I've worked with plenty of dads, like I said before, but the program is designed for men within Australia who want to lose some weight, who want to gain their fitness back, who want to really take control of their life. And that's why I'm putting it out to you as the bow hunting community, because I feel like there's a few people in this category that would really love that, would love to see better fitness for not only their own personal gain in bow hunting and in archery in general, but also obviously the side of looking after your family and providing for your family and being the best version of you to be able to give back to your family. So if you guys wanted to reach out, if you want to find out any more information about that, you can reach out to me at becomingbowhunter.podcast on Instagram, or you can hit up chiefdads.com. That's chief, CHIEF DADS.com for more information on the Chief Dads program. Bow hunters, what is up? It has been a little bit of time in between podcasts. And as you guys can all appreciate, 2020 has been a very interesting year from my end. I did have to go a little bit radio silent as I had some other things I need to focus on, like my family and like our business, making sure that we could keep that all up and running, which is all back in the clear, which is great. So for now, I am back, and I'm going to be hopefully recording a few episodes in the coming weeks, or definitely got a few in the coming weeks and hopefully in the coming months. And I will release them kind of as they come out. I think rather than having a schedule like I've done previously, it's going to be a bit more of as and when they come on. So firstly, I would love to say thank you to everyone who's reached out and given the words of encouragement, for like in particular on Facebook or Instagram, pretty much is the places where most people reach out. And yeah, thank you just for keeping the conversation alive with me. I think at one stage I definitely burnt myself out a little bit with the podcast, because I'd put so much pressure on myself to make it a good product and make sure that I was getting it out regularly to you guys. And I do plan on keep doing that and being a regular podcast to some extent, but it's definitely not going to be as frequent as weekly like it was at one point in time. So firstly, yeah, thank you to all those people who did give us some sort of encouragement during that time. It is really, really much so appreciated. For this week, I'm pretty excited. We've got Mr. Bevan Blacklock on talking about food safety, in particular like meat safety when you're out in the field. So it's kind of split into two parts, or three parts really. A little bit about Bevan and his hunting and the stuff that he does. A bit about the camp food safety, so the stuff that you're taking into camp and making sure that you're not getting it full of any sort of, I guess, sickness that passes on to the body, or bugs or anything like that. And then we talk about the actual meat processing side of things and things to look out for, things to process, things to go through when you're processing meat, and best practices for that. So hopefully this one's a little bit insightful for you. It's kind of something that I've been excited to talk about for a while, because I think it is really quite important, and Bevan kind of talks about that as to why it is so important as well. In regards to me and my end, I got to go out for a little goat hunt earlier this year, which is unreal. I was really stoked on that. A lot of other things kind of fell through because of the whole COVID situation, but that's everyone within the world can probably relate to that. And so for you guys, I really hope that you're getting out hunting, and would love to hear your stories. If you want to reach out on becomingbowhunter.podcast on Instagram, it's probably the best place to reach me. But yeah, enjoying having those conversations and I'm starting to shoot my bow a lot more. I'm actually excited. I'm getting myself a brand new bow, or brand new secondhand bow that I'm really pumped for. So that's coming within the next few weeks. I'm getting a little elite cure, which I'm stoked on. So team, I hope you're really well. I hope you're getting to shoot some arrows at least at the range or in your backyard or wherever you're getting out and about. And really, I look forward to talking to you guys soon through your podcast and or through this podcast and for you guys hearing. So thanks so much for sticking around. Thanks so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Bow hunters, welcome back. It's been a hot minute, but here we are. I'm sitting with Bevan Blacklock. Bevan, welcome, mate.
Thank you.
So I'm pretty excited for this one. I've actually I've had a while off of hunting. It got to the stage where I was talking about hunting more than I was actually hunting myself, and I was listening in this little hiatus or break from the podcast. I was listening to quite a lot of hunting because it was just kind of my quick touch back into the hunting world, because obviously 2020 has been quite an interesting year. But one thing that I heard was along the lines of a meat scientist, and it really kind of got me thinking, hey, that's something that I haven't really talked about much on the podcast, is actually the food safety side of things. Like I've had touches of it here and there, and like I often ask the question, would you eat the wild pigs in Australia or not? And everyone's got their own opinions on that. But I thought it'd be kind of really cool to get you along, Bev. I actually saw you talk at a little muster that was at the Renegade Bowman's event that they had last year. It's kind of where I got to meet a fair few of our local bow hunters, which was really quite cool. But you kind of hopped up and had a talk about food safety for hunters, and I thought it was really quite insightful. And I think it's something that is really valuable for everyone to know, especially for everyone who's utilizing the food or utilizing the animals for food, which I think is definitely a bit more of an appealing piece for people who are getting into the bow hunting world now. It's not so much about the whacking and stacking, although that is still part of it. I think there's a lot of people who are really getting after it because they want to fend for themselves, and they like the idea of getting their own meat and really kind of living off of the land a little bit more. So I thought, what better way than to get someone like yourself in, Bev? So I think really probably the best place to start, mate, would just be giving us a quick background on what your actual role is, because this is kind of your day-to-day job is actually inspecting meat and doing that side of consulting, right?
Yeah, I suppose I make a quid out of being a contract auditor for food safety systems. Mm-hmm. Generally, that's in any of the supply chains that feed us every day. From high risk prepared meals through to basically primary production. So that's what I do, and if I'm not doing that, I'm working in the industry helping people put those systems together so they can be, I suppose, compete with those people they want to compete with. So that's my role in this world, and I get out and bow hunt when I can.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of the same for most of us, right? But I think obviously this is two very different worlds, and that's kind of just something that I wanted to give as almost a little bit of a waiver for everyone. Like obviously the stuff that you deal with day to day is in a food factory processor or in the big kitchens. It's in like a proper industrial program, whereas this is obviously we're talking about out in the field. So there are going to be some differences, and what we're talking about is essentially just trying to take the best methods for capturing your game from the wild and going through that process. So it's kind of obviously we want people to use their own common sense when it comes to this, and we're just going to talk about best practices.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We tend to make food very complex. If you were picking a bunch of tomatoes out of the backyard, then it's a hell of a lot different equation to, getting that as a processed salad from the salad bar, Yeah. So along that process, there are hurdles to food safety. You've got a hell of a lot less hurdles to food safety generally if you're knocking something in the bush and processing it and eating it, cooking to serve and eating it yourself the next day. We don't have transport and distribution and cold chain to worry about. So in a lot of ways, harvesting to eat is a lot cleaner and cheaper and safer than if you were processing that into a meat pie, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously there's reasons as to why you can't just like for instance, shoot a red deer out in the wild and then take it straight to a butcher's, right? Like there's processes and policies that are in place that stop those things from happening now here in Australia. Like I know there is definitely cases of that in America where you can take it to the butchers and they'll kind of do it all for you. And maybe if you were to find yourself, I don't know actually the regulations to this, but maybe if you were to find yourself a traveling butcher, they might be able to do it. Bevan, do you know anything to that?
Look, generally the law of the land here is that we have very, very tight biosecurity rules in Australia.
Yep.
So if you were to do that and transfer it from property to property, then you're more likely to transfer disease like brucellosis and tuberculosis.
Yep.
Are things that get transferred very easily in meat and meat products, and generally we don't do that. So those laws apply to those things under the Meat Act.
Uh-huh.
So those acts are generally called up, and mandatory regulations come under the Australian standards. So, once you get to the regulations of the land, you whether that be Safe Food Queensland in Queensland, they administer the act. Those regulations allow for butcher shops to operate, processing facilities to operate. And then the Australian standard comes in after that about how you prepare the meat itself. So the Food Standards Code itself is, I suppose, common to all states.
Yep.
Whereas the states govern their jurisdictions and how we actually handle meat from property to property. And you'd know that each individual property has a property identification code, or a PIC.
Yep.
That property identification code allows for sampling and testing at accredited abattoirs, and those abattoirs then send to accredited butcher shops. Those accredited butcher shops are then responsible for selling to the consumer. So game meat goes outside of that, but all game meat in Australia is actually processed through accredited establishments, unless you're taking it yourself. And then it allows for harvesting meat, in recreation. So you still, if you can't sell that meat to someone, that comes under a regulation. If you're not accredited to be part of that, under that regulation, then you can't sell your game meat to someone, your neighbour or your family member for that matter. You can consume it yourself.
How's it going in regards to gifting? Is there any rules or regulations around that?
Around what, mate? Sorry.
Gifting the meat, like if you were to, for instance, give someone a roast or a back leg of a red deer or something you catch.
Yeah, there's fair play rules, Matty. Like you wouldn't be doing that for profit or gain.
No. Yes.
That's generally the fair play rules. And
okay.
If I knocked a deer and made roast out of it, then that'd be fine as well. But that's not shouldn't be a general rule. You shouldn't be taking anything for consideration for that or payment or favour from that.
Yeah, no, I thought that was the case. I thought it was pretty similar to what I've heard from the States as well. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, before we dive too deep down the meat sector, let's talk about your bow hunting career itself, Bevan. When did you start bow hunting?
My first claim was back in 2007, I think, somewhere around that. But, I grew up in Cape York Peninsula, so we mucked around with bows as little kids. But my first ABA claim was a goat at Huntinng back about 2007, I think.
Yep.
Something like that. I've been going ever since. I've a lot of species. Recently a couple of record class species, goat and a fallow deer. Mm-hmm. I've trophy class in pigs. Red deer. I've taken a scrub bull, a few different things like that. I've had a bow hunter award under ABA.
Yep.
So
which is the Australian Bow Hunters Association, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I shouldn't use acronyms, should I? But it's I've been a measurer and the club president at Renegades over time, and actively involved in the bow hunting scene as a bow hunter proficiency trainer as well.
Yep.
Still a measurer. Still do those things within bow hunting to support others. Go on a couple of trips every year, generally, deer season and another one. So, yeah, it's a good part of what I do in my every year. It's my sport.
Yeah, definitely. And so when did it ever change from you being a hunter for, I guess, trophy game compared to it being a hunter for meat? Was that ever a thing for you, or was it always the trophy side?
Oh, look, always interested in trophy bow hunting. I think that's, your next animal in that species should be better than your last one, or at least representative in the species. I think that's a good ethical way of looking at things. But always interested in taking game for meat. Like we've always done that. That's something that, if we can utilise the carcass, we always have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of our ABA policies that we carry through. So it's one of our ethics.
Okay.
So always making something out of something, and that's probably goes without saying.
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't know if I've actually talked to anyone who's been a part of ABA, or if they have been, we haven't actively talked about that. So I like that. That is actually one of the ethics or morals of the club. I think that's unreal, really, because otherwise it's just an animal going to waste, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. The Archery Alliance has a number of different affiliates to ABA. ABA represents bow hunters. That's what it does, and legally and as part of ABA membership gives you insurance to as a bow hunter, just like you would under sporting shooters.
Yeah.
So it gives you insurance and it gives you a framework where you can claim your game, and then those claim game can be part of how we represent the bow hunting fraternity in with the regulators. So it's a really good. It's a good framework, and encourage everyone to be part of some way of justifying our existence as bow hunters as a sport. We shouldn't take it for granted.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I need to put my hand up for and say I've been a bit guilty of not doing is joining a club yet. Like joining an archery club in its first place, and then also just being a part of any memberships as such, because I think my mindset previous to now was always... every time I've got spare time, I want to go hunting, and the block that I go hunting on is a private block anyway, so what was the point? But now I'm starting to see, like, I need to practice on some 3D animals. Like, I think that would really be quite beneficial for me shooting in the wild as well, but also just the fact of having that insurance and being able to put, I guess, property owners at ease that you do have that as well is obviously a big thing.
It's that's how I choose to do my bow hunting, and obviously everyone does it differently, but the groups of people that I bow hunt with are also ABA members, and we have our story time every day, and we measure up, and that's cooking a feed and measuring your game, and it's just a good way of burning wood and looking at a fire, it's good.
Yeah, definitely. So
comradeship.
Sorry, go on.
It's just a good way to finish a day, It's all using a common language, Matty,
Yeah, I agree. And so when it comes to measuring, is there rules against you measuring your own animals?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, you can't measure your own, but
I swear it was this big.
I promise. No, but that's there's absolutely you always have independence in what you're doing, and but if you're in a bow hunters camp, you don't want to be bringing home 15 goat heads from Thargomindah or something. If you can measure them out there, and you've only got to bring your own home, or there's a couple in the group, it's always makes it more convenient,
Yeah, definitely. And so I think, like, obviously measuring the animal is also another sign of respect to that animal. But do you go to the extent of doing taxidermy? Do you have a few heads kind of hanging around the place? Do you do some Euro mounts? Like, how do you look after your heads from when you've taken them?
Yeah, Euro mounts for me. I do Euro mounts almost exclusively.
Yep.
I have no taxidermy examples.
Uh-huh.
From what I've taken. Like I have a beautiful family, a lovely wife, but I'm not allowed to bring heads inside the house. So
Yeah.
there's my shed can't handle too much. So
Nice.
Euro mounts are my way to go, and I've tanned hides and
Yeah.
played around with stuff over time, and done arty stuff with them. But really, it's just Euro mounts and just other ways of displaying them. If like goats, I've shot lots and lots of trophy goats, so I really only have my three big fellas in the shed, on a Euro mounts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've only just had done was a hide. I just had it tanned by a taxidermist, and I was really stoked to kind of receive that in the mail, have it rock up, and now it's kind of just a throw over the top of our couch. And I think that kind of fits in well. But yeah, I've had the conversation with my wife as well about what would your thoughts be on a full mount, and it's much the same as your conversation goes. I think we've got a Euro mount head in the lounge, the dining room, and that's awesome. But we had a few skulls kind of hanging up at once, and someone came in and said, "Wow, there's so much death in this room." I'm like, it's funny when it's placed like that, because that's not what it obviously represents to us. It's more so the fact of the life that you're representing, I think, and that's what kind of reminds you of. But it's funny that from an outsider perspective, it's just seen as quite a dark death room. It's I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, look, the other side that really you get into is photography. Some of us are fortunate enough to take photos of game while they're, in their natural state, and then as a trophy, and that's great as well. It's another really great part of bow hunting is bird watching and fishing and photography and
being up close and personal.
Yeah, getting out in the bush and doing those things that we all like to do. That's generally, it's a complementary too, hey? You're not in competition with, so no. We generally.
I think if I was to do it purely for the hunting side, I don't know. Like, it'd be completely different, right? The amount of animals you actually put down compared to the amount of time you spend in the bush, like, you almost need to take those other things in and actually find the joy in the process. Because if you're to just always do it just for putting animals down, you may as well go get yourself a rifle, right? For the actual, percentage wise that you're getting animals down. At least that's my case.
No. Look, I think most of us have done several marathons with a bow over our shoulder without doing anything like claiming game. It's you got to like walking, and you got to like carrying your bow. So you might as well get used to doing other things as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. No, Mitch Warren, who you've been hunting with quite a lot, he actually told me a fair bit about you guys doing your bird watching while you're out and about. And you've got, I think he had his little bird book in the car when we went for a drive down the coast, and he was just showing it to me quickly and saying that you guys will often kind of point out the birds that are out and about and listen for the calls and stuff and yell out to each other, "Oi, did you hear that one? That's a blah, blah, blah."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always that and identifying trees and all of those sort of things. It's always, your bushcraft's very important, and survival techniques and, what you carry on you is what you've got to survive with for 2 days because no one's going to come looking for you.
No, exactly.
So you've got to be self-dependent, and all of those things make up why we do bow hunting, I think. And I think they're the, the mentors in my game were like that.
Yeah.
And, when you share these things with people, food's always very important in that pecking order, and how you get organised for a trip, and how you're going to make it work for you. And, you've got to have a method, and that all comes into what you're having a yarn about.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Bev, did you just move away from your microphone? It's just changed in volume quite dramatically.
Getting a bit light, wasn't it?
That's better. That's a lot better. Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's the bushcraft side of things is something that I'm starting to pick up more and more the more that I go out with other people, other hunters that have been doing it for a long time. And I think that's really quite fascinating and kind of puts, like you said, a whole new light to the art of bow hunting itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, mate, let's get into the food safety side of things for hunters. Where's kind of the best place to start? Like, do you think we should start in regards to the tools you need, or should we start with the process?
I think, from a food safety point of view, I think it's really important to know who you're feeding.
Yep.
And that, I think that's the first thing that you've got to really consider. Like, if it were you and your own family, then you wouldn't have to worry too much about what you took, because that'd be what was in your pantry.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to agree with that, eh? So there's nothing real complex about, you don't think about food safety in your own home and you take it as a given.
Yes.
You take for a given that the food that you put in your tucker box is, if you purchased it from, one of the retailers, that it would be safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so long as you're paying attention to labelling and normal what you would do at home, you're going to be pretty safe. So I always say in our hunting groups or anything I get a chance to talk with is just make sure you don't have other complicating issues.
Yes.
Recently, we had a diverticulitis case in the camp.
Mm-hmm.
And those type of things are what you've got to cater for. So if someone's got sensitivities to, for example, gluten, or
allergies in general,
sensitivities to allergens or something, you've really got to be across that. If someone needs to take their medication morning and night, then the camp should be helping them to do that, because in the excitement of a hunting day and racing out of camp because you want to get out before daylight or something, we often forget to do those normal things, and it's hard to deal with food safety if someone's crook.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and if someone's really crook, then the first thing you need is plenty of water.
Yep.
So water's the next thing that comes up. So once you've got your tucker box set, you've got the people that are in your group are going to be comfortable, and usually it's their responsibility to make sure they bring their medication and things. Once you're set up like that, then you just then got to make sure the next biggest item, which is water, is made available. These days we usually have a couple of slabs of, bottled water.
Yep.
For no other reason than it's convenient. And if someone's, an older person in the group or younger people in the group always forget to drink enough water.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've just got to make sure you've got water available and make sure backpacks are clean.
Yep.
So that any of those things, that any fluid you do put in, because that's going to make up more weight than what you've eaten in food, has to be okay.
Yeah, from a health standpoint as well, in regards to water, like obviously you've got your different filtration systems, your different bottled systems, but in regards to probably one of the healthiest variations you can get of the water is the pure AU, which comes in like a goon cask essentially. So you got yourself a pillow as well as a drinking sack.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's no end to water. Like you can, I've got a water purifier that I have in my kit if we need it. But I think there's only been 2 times that we've actually had to use it.
Yes.
And then, it's a decision about whether you do that or you move camp. So the water's a very important thing, and then of course where you're going to store your food becomes the next bit. We usually have at least 3 methods of storage. So you've got your dry storage, so ambient, packets of stuff and, cutlery and all of those things are dry storage.
Yep.
And then you've got frozen and you've got chilled. And, if you generally those things in a camp end up getting mixed with beverages and things like that as well. So beer is usually a priority. To what extent is up to everyone else, but you've got to. Generally, someone says, "Well, we have a beer fridge, and we've got our food fridges, and you try and keep them separate." So your freezer's got to be a freezer, and your fridge has got to keep stuff below 5 degrees C.
Yeah.
Simple rules, and then some camps, you tend to have an esky or something set up as well, so that you can put stuff in that you're going to use into the esky, and then the fridge doesn't get opened all the time. So just about managing cold chain.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, when you're cooking, the freezer's usually got, some prepared meals in it.
Mm-hmm.
They've been, frozen at home, and you take them along. Then it's got some fresh frozen products, so you're going to thaw it out and cook it.
Yep.
So, cryovacking is a great tool for if you're going to take any proteins out into the bush. Most of your proteins should be put into cryovac bags, so they don't leak in the fridge when you're thawing them out.
It also stops, obviously, over aeration, which would stop any sort of extra mold if it was to get to that stage, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So you're minimising spoilage.
Yeah.
That's the whole. So in our food safety area, we talk about the 2 and 4 rule.
Uh-huh.
And this is not me. None of this is me. This is about proper science, and it's bucket science. So there's finer areas of these things, and there's whole bunches of analysis you can do to determine whether something's safe. But in the bucket science of what happens at the your local cook shop, or your cafe, they're regulated to 2 and 4 rule. So once you've got something, I suppose your window of safety is under 5 degrees, so colder than 5 degrees.
Yep.
And hotter than 60 degrees.
Uh-huh.
So bugs don't live colder than 5 and hotter than 60 generally.
Yes, got you.
Right. So if you think of your body temperature, most of the pathogens that make us crook live in that temperature range. We call them thermotolerant coliforms, or things that can grow at our body temperature.
Yeah. So that's parasites and bugs and whatever else.
Parasites are bugs really. Parasites themselves will live in that temperature because that's where they're blood parasites, and they're a living being, as they've got different structure to them.
Okay.
Whereas your microbiology, you can't see it. You're not even on the tip of a pin. They are micro because of that, and you can't see them. You can't smell them. You can't, unless it's a spoilage organism, you never smell them. So you can't see them. You wash your hands, you can't see them if you've washed them off or not. So your pathogens are the salmonellas and E. coli's and staphylococci and things like that make you sick. They live in our temperature range. They survive it in those other temperature ranges, but they proliferate in our body temperature range. So once we get those things out to thaw, or we're dealing with cooking, we use a 2 and 4 rule. So, 2 hours above 5 degrees or under 60 degrees, we say 2 hours you can use it, and without any sort of mitigation at all.
Yeah.
So that's like cooking a stew. Just make sure you eat it in the next 2 hours, or do something with it.
Yeah.
The trouble we get there is, first, as old mate gets into the camp early, and you're short of pots or something, he cooks the rice first.
Yes.
And then the bloke who's going to cook the stew gets in late because he's carrying a bloody carcass home or something. And he decides that he's going to cook the other stuff. The rice has been sitting around, which has got all of the bits that make bugs grow, and you get a gut full of bugs from the rice.
Yeah.
Because we haven't put it into, it's gone over 2 hours, and so we then say over 2 hours up to 4 hours in that temperature range, so above 5 degrees and below 60 degrees, and then you need to do something with it. So either get it back into the cold chain, so get it down to below 5 degrees, or stick it back on and heat it up above 60 degrees, so that you can still use it safely.
So say, for instance, old mate was to come into camp, he cooks some rice up, he takes his lot and then hears that the other guys have got a beast down and it's not going to be a while to their home. Ideally, he should be chucking it either in the fridge or just recooking it before they eat. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah, so long as it's inside that 4 hours. So the general rule is that, we cook our rice we know Bill's going to be late, so we better put it into bags or put a cover on it and put it in the fridge to get the temperature out of it.
Yeah.
Get it down to below 5 degrees before you reheat it again. So, that means that pathogens live in. That's a great Yersinia or one of those bugs, one of those guys that live in that temperature range. You mightn't make everyone crook, but someone might go to the toilet a few more times than they did the day before.
Yeah, which is not what you want when you're out in the bush.
No, exactly. And their dehydration comes in and, oh, mate's a bit lazy and he sleeps in the next day and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like that happen and it's just about very, very avoidable to make sure that you just follow that 2 and 4 rule. So 2 hours between, 5 and 60 degrees and then start making decisions about what you got to do before it's 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we call that log growth. So every 20 minutes, that salmonella population doubles. So you start with a population that's not going to make you ill, say less than 10 coliforming units. But if you multiply that by 10, you should double it. So it becomes 20.
Yeah, okay.
20 becomes 40, 40 becomes 80, 80 becomes 160.
It's exponential, yeah.
Yeah, exponential. So you end up with a log growth. So that's why that 2 hours is important.
And really, it becomes that if it's got 4 hours or more, like you start to look at potentially getting violently ill, right? Like you're talking about before, hey, maybe someone goes to the toilet a few more times, but outside of that, then if you're getting an infection of salmonella or something like that, then yeah, obviously that can cause to quite severe illness, ruin a whole hunting trip.
Exactly, it becomes it becomes a pathogenic load, as they say.
Yeah.
So that becomes enough to be a pathogen to affect your health and change your plans about what you're doing while you're out there. And that makes sure it turns it from the illness from being a case of the trots to some other systemic illness.
Yeah.
And if you're already immunocompromised or you're older or you've got another bug or something, it can actually be terminal.
Yes, yeah, which is definitely something you never want.
Yeah, so that's the general. If you're going to start with something, you generally start to make sure you can stay healthy while you're out there.
Yeah.
Then you make sure that you can keep yourself hydrated and be in a position to consume food normally.
Yeah.
And then you get into food safety, which is a very, very simple bucket science thing to look at with the 2 and 4 rule. And the only other thing with the 2 and 4 rule is it's cumulative. So if it means that every time you open that fridge up and you temperature abuse that product and it goes above 5 degrees, then you've got to count that time. So if you're going to use that rice over a couple of days and it's already had 2 hours above 5 degrees before you chilled it, and then you take it out to make lunch the next day, then you've got to make sure it doesn't spend more than 2 hours out again. So that accumulation part of time on the 2 and 4 hour rule is something you've got to think about,
Yeah, so it's like a bank system essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, you're banking time. You're banking what you're doing and make sure it doesn't get above 4 hours, and then you're pretty safe to go. And, it's very rare that you hear of anyone getting crook from a meal that you prepared in the bush and eating it straight away.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Almost impossible to hurt someone,
So, I mean, that's from the campsite and the food that you're taking along. How about from the other side when we're actually going through the processing of meat? Like, for instance, is there anything else actually before we jump to that? Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we jump?
No, that's about it. Other than camp hygiene, make sure that you're not adding to that 2 and 4 rule by being pigs,
Yeah, wash your hands, do the regular stuff you would do.
Exactly. You've got to still make sure that, you got to think that your mother's looking over your shoulder. You've got to make sure that, for us, we always have our waste separated. You've got general waste and you've got food waste. So keep them separate. Burnables are separate from the waste you're going to cart back to Brisbane.
Yeah.
Never leave a camp, worse than when you turned up. You always improve it.
Exactly right. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
That's right, yeah. So, making sure that when you wash up, you put all your dirty stuff to the left and your clean stuff to the right, if that's the way you do it. You're not putting your dirty stuff over the top of clean stuff.
Yeah.
It's just common sense stuff. That someone in the camp has got to say to Bill that, look, mate, if you don't mind, we'll do our rinse first, and then we'll make sure we do a wash up and put everything away. Otherwise, someone turns up with dirty hands and touches clean stuff, and won't be him that picks up that dirty plate, will it? It'll be someone else who puts a salad on top of it and then cross-contaminates. So you've got to be very careful in the camp to make sure you stay tidy.
Yeah.
But don't be an ogre about it. But everyone's there to have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
But someone's got to be responsible for tidiness and hygiene,
Yeah. No, I really like that. That's great. And I think it's, like you said, unfortunately, sometimes common sense is not so common. So, yes, everyone uses their own common sense, but it's nice just to have those little reminders as well as to, like, best practices, I guess, when we're in camp. So, yeah, like I said, moving on to more so the harvesting of the game and getting into that side of things. Like, for instance, when I went for a goat hunt recently, I got a billy and a nanny, and when I was cutting the nanny apart, unfortunately, I had the shot that I did was her kind of quartering away. I think that would be the right shot, the right way to say it. But essentially, the angle I was on, she was walking straight up the hill into my wind, which would have I was probably seconds away from being centered. So I took the shot, and the angle that she was on, essentially, it went through the gut, through the lungs. Or through one lung, and then out the front shoulder. So it was a good shot, really great shot. But unfortunately, it meant that the gut bag got punctured and it went through a lot of the meat. So that's a process where I now need to look at the meat and say, "Oh, hold up, this is now contaminated. I need to look at what I can keep, what I can't keep, and process it through that way." So I mean, maybe if we can dive a little bit deeper into the best practices when it comes to harvesting game.
Yeah, I suppose this is another one that's pretty straightforward. Really, is that we talked before about those pathogenic organisms.
Mm-hmm.
One of those that's or two of them that are really common that are in the gut of everything, and ours as well, is E. coli and Salmonella.
Yeah.
And E. coli from ruminant animals is a very dangerous bug.
Okay, so ruminant animals being red meats, correct?
Oh yeah, red meats and those ones that ruminate. So they're the ones with multiple guts, they've got a big fermenter like goats and those guys that that take food in and then ferment it and then move it through a stomach similar to ours before it hits the small intestine and then the large intestine and gets dehydrated and then they pop it out. So when you get the normal anatomy of an animal means that you've got a big bulk of, probably as much as late 40% of, say 50% of the animal is waste.
Yeah.
When you take skin and gut away. So even if you get the most, the best animal, you've got, 10% of its weight's in its head, and then you've got, another that in its hide, a bit more than that in its hide, and then you've got a gut that's got to be rolled out and disposed of, and that gut holds a lot of pathogens.
Yeah.
So E. coli, even though there's only one or two, arguably, that will kill you, all the other E. colis at certain levels will make you crook, give you a pain in the guts. The likes of the Garibaldi case in Australia and the Jack in the Box cases in the States, and are all caused by a bug called E. coli 0157H7, and it makes you bleed from every orifice, and it's a terrible, painful death. And the only place that lives really is in the rumen of, or the gut of animals, and the shit in animals.
Yeah.
So feces and feces control when you're butchering in the field is very important. Any gut spills are a potential pathogenic load. No second guessing it. And if you get a pathogenic load of E. coli, you're pretty buggered, It's not the conversation you want to have. So there's two ways to this, Matty, I reckon. And for me, if I had that carcass, I wouldn't even be trying to disrupt the whole carcass.
Yeah.
My first step would be probably to, so none of the hindquarters were damaged and none of the back straps.
Yeah.
and probably if you were quartering away and you're shooting from the near side, then the near side shoulder would have been all right. The offside shoulder would have been buggered.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I would have just taken the two hind legs, and that's simply, and try and avoid it's being a nanny. It might have had it was lactating probably.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if it's dry or not. Just avoid any of that memory tissue because it's a big, pathogen load as well.
Memory tissue being around the breast, like around the udder.
Udder, yeah. So what you're going to do is cut a line under the top side, so the underside of the leg, and then free the joint, and then take that back to the backbone and remove it and hang it up.
Yeah.
Don't try and do anything with the skinning while you're doing it because there's no harm in the skin. It's actually like a big packet. It's keeping all of the bad bugs out. It's one of its biggest barriers to getting crook. So it's like a big packet. So you remove that off and hang it up.
Yep.
Don't put it on the ground. Don't worry about the flies that go on it. They're not going to harm anything. You're going to trim it off anyway, and then take the other leg off. Run your knife up along the back. Take your straps out. Roll him over and take the other the other front leg off.
Yeah.
And don't get any smarter than that. Don't touch the other leg where the arrow went through. It's just going to be dragging shit all through that. And what would have happened is that when they go through anaphylaxis, when they're dying, all of those peripheral blood would have been pushed towards the heart.
Yeah.
So it gets transported. It pushes that E. coli back through the rest of the body as well. Remember, you can't see these things.
Yeah.
They're very minute. So they're getting dragged back through the carcass. And if you try and recover anything else, even the blood that comes from the heart now is going to be contaminated, So
there you go, yeah.
Yeah, so you just leave that. So if you've had a dirty kill like that, you're better off just leaving the where the arrow went through. You just leave that alone. Don't even try and value add to that. Doesn't mean you can't recover most everything that was useful anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't break that cavity open. The same thing happens. Like I shot my record class fallow buck. I shot him from behind, Texas heart shot style, but up through the nuts, straight up underneath his purse.
Yeah, wow.
Where his testicles met his belly.
Yeah. And
the arrow went straight through there and sort of was just touching the skin coming out his throat.
Yeah, wow.
So he died within 15 yards, it was devastating the way that it dropped him, but I was able to recover everything from that animal.
Yes.
There wasn't a bit that didn't touch a piece of meat. It was just viscera, viscera meaning gut. And it just went straight through his heart, and, bled him out instantly almost,
Yeah.
So when you do that, we do what we call a short gut. And that really is just making sure that you secure all of those feces points, all of the raw material going into the animal. So the esophagus, you tie that off. So that's where the water and grass goes into the gut.
Yep.
So that happens at the front end. And then basically you cut a ring around their bum, put a bag around that and tie it.
Yep.
This stuff doesn't cost anything to carry this stuff.
No, exactly. So hold up, before we get too far, so you're talking about when you tying off the esophagus, you're literally slitting the throat, pulling the esophagus out a little bit and tying it there and then?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the bag trick, I've never seen this done before. Do you just put some tape around it? Do you stick it, do you use some rubber bands? How do you tape it up, or how do you bag it up?
Zip ties, mate. So
zip ties, yeah.
Just a freezer bag.
Yeah.
And you basically ring the anus and pull it out.
Yep.
So, in this case here, the likes of his pizzle and things like that, they are going to come all off.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about those things. And then when you pull the anus out, or you got your hands, the best thing to do is just make a little handle.
Yep.
Between their bum and their back legs, and you use that. Just cut a little V and use that as a handle. And then as you're pulling that, you're just cutting around the anus that way.
Yes.
And then when it frees itself, and you'll feel it come free, it's not hard. It's not a hard job. And then you just still hold on to that bit of skin, the handle.
Yep.
Invert that bag inside out, grab the whole lot, push the bag over the top of the anus, and then we just use zip ties and just run a zip tie around it, and it's never going to come undone.
Yeah. There you go.
Then punch that straight back through the bum hole.
Yep.
In the cavity, and then while you're there, you're just going to reach forward, grab the pizzle, and you should have glove on. I sort of meant to mention before, any of these things you should be preventing any of those pathogens getting on your hand or in cuts in your between your fingernails or any of those things in your eyes.
Yep.
We've got too many examples of people getting crook from those things. And then like leptospirosis and things like that come straight from urine into your eyes, or in your mouth, and you've got a good case of it if it's prevalent,
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful with all female genitalia for other, zoonotic disease or ones, zoonosis just means disease that can go from animal to man.
Okay.
So once you've got all of the bad bits secured, that pizzle just comes straight off, by the way. You take their nuts and pizzle and everything all with it, all in one. Take the skin with it.
Yep.
Down to the belly sinews. And don't be flash about it. Take everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that just gets cut off where that handle was cut up to. When you're taking the bum out, it just gets cut off there.
Yep.
And that's about as flash as you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the front end tied off, you've got the back end tied off, so nothing much can happen. And then you're going to run your knife from basically between their legs, about up to their diaphragm.
Uh-huh.
A good 18 inches, something like that. And then, roll them out so they're laying on their near side generally, because the rumen's on the right side, that left side. So when you open that up, the first thing that's going to hit you in the face is the liver.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just make sure everything looks normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's if it looks normal and looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably going to be okay,
So we're talking about there, when we say normal, talking about making sure there's no spots on any of the organs that should not be there. Any funky looking things, it should be essentially the colour it is, should be the colour it is the whole way through, pretty much, unless it's got some form of fat around it, like on the heart or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you approach that animal and it was looking normal and feeling normal and was responding to a call, or it was, what you'd normally see in hunting, they don't sit there and wait for you to come and shoot them. If he was sitting there under a tree and he's favouring a leg and was coughing and he lets you get in close and shooting, good chance that animal wasn't normal.
Yeah.
So, we're not harvesting from those type of animals, surely. That's the common sense bit. So, if the animal was normal when you shot it, there's a good chance inside it's going to be normal. You know what I mean? It's full, it's got a normal belly, and it bled normally, it didn't have mattery eyes, it was, these are things that its skin was in good order. If it's mangy and shitty and not looking good, then you've got to probably think about whether or not you're going to take the animal for meat,
Yeah. So to put a bit of a spanner in the work, let's say this is something I've heard recently, that before an animal goes through rigor mortis, you shouldn't actually cut it. You shouldn't cut it up, because essentially the muscle becomes it gets shortened, it tenses up, and therefore you actually don't get a good cooking sensation from the meat. So what that would look like is, if I was to kill a goat, let's put a goat or a deer as an example, that they should wait, or they should rest for 4 hours before you essentially quarter them out or do anything like that. So yes, you can gut them and set them to cool straight away, but that you shouldn't essentially change them much until after that 4-hour process where the body's gone through rigor mortis. If that was the case, if that was the process you're looking to do, what would be the best practice for that to happen? Would it be where should you be hanging it, and how should you be going about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because there's a lot of myths around about how muscle changes from being live to dead.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a couple of things that happen to every animal when it dies, and it goes through a natural process of rigor mortis, and stiffness of death just means that it gets stiff. And the reason it gets stiff is the extensor muscles in our bodies are a hell of a lot stronger than our flexor muscles.
Yeah.
Yep. So, stiffening up is just that, those extensor muscles, the ones that push out, are a hell of a lot stronger than those ones that pull in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd pull up into a ball when we went into rigor mortis,
Yes, yeah.
So if you think that there's two lots of muscles, generally the ones that are weakest are the ones that are tenderest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's another bit of logic, isn't it,
Yeah.
So the silver side's a big muscle mass, and it's going to push your legs out further than your top side, which is going to pull them in.
Yes.
So, your adductor muscle and all of those ones are little soft pussy muscles in the insides of your legs.
Yeah.
So, you've got all of those things that work against you. So when the muscle's working normally, it's energized. So this is a long way of answering it, but there is no real difference at that level of product, unless you're hanging up MSA graded beef and you can make it more tender if you've got time and you've got the facilities by hanging it up, through the H bone.
Yes.
And tender stretching it, and that just means all of those tender ended muscles are actually getting stretched greater than what the flexors are making them minimise.
So that wouldn't be on a basic. Is it gimbal? What are they called?
Just a hook up through the H bone. Yeah.
So that's not through the feet, is it? That's through the pelvis, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you hang them up through the pelvis instead of the hocks.
Yeah, and that just lets it to rest into its most natural state, in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's not traditional, but that's, if you're going to do the ultimate, that's how you would hang them up to set. And that's what they call it, setting, Yeah. So that's why you hang them up overnight and then butcher them in the morning. But reality is that the muscle fibre itself is not going to react any differently.
Yes.
Right, so it's still going to be the same muscle fibre, it's just going to be a different shape.
Okay.
So it goes through this process of glycogen being, that's the energy in the muscle.
Yep, the sugars, yep.
Being converted to lactic acid.
Yep.
And that natural pH decline, or the acidity in the meat declining, means that the pathogens in the meat are less likely to grow. And it's self-preserving.
Yes.
So we have our meat, a normal mammal, us included, would have a pH of set meat of between 5.2 and 5.6, 5.7, something like that.
Yep.
So it's quite acidic, and that's a logarithmic scale as well. So something at 0.6 is better than something at 5.7. So 5.7 is getting on the higher pH side.
Yep.
And the meat's likely to be darker. It doesn't set as well. It's likely to be clammy and sticky. And under 5.2, it's probably going to be a bit lighter in colour and mushy, So you've got that balance, and if you're out in the bush and you're processing, I think it's how you get it off, and make sure you look after the hygiene first, and then it's still going to set. It's going to go through Riga just the same as if you had it set overnight or did it straight away. It's still going to set, whether you hang it up independently or as a carcass.
Yeah.
The important part is leaving it set. And you said 4 hours. It's more likely to be 8 hours before it sets properly in most carcasses.
And that's animal dependent as well, right? Like the size of the animal, more so.
More likely the size, Matty. Yeah. Like if you and it's around that. We like to see in the regulations it says the deep butt temperature needs to get down to 20 degrees within, I forget what it is now, but it's a couple of hours. You've got to hit it with cold chain.
Yeah.
And that stops all those bugs growing. So, it's just about, if you get a big old buck deer, like big buck that I knocked down, big record class fella, he'd set the next morning. It was excellent.
Yeah.
And he was done as a whole carcass, whereas, heaps of goats that I've killed have just been done as singles. There's been deer I've shot that I've done as just primals as well, because you open that pathogen cage up, you're asking for trouble, So you shouldn't be in a position where you're sorting shit from meat. That's if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You should be keeping things clean. If you're there trying to save meat and trimming shit off meat in the bush, you're really, really not looking good.
Yeah, I have to laugh at that because that's definitely what I have done in the past. It's very funny that the whole process we talked about with the nanny was very different, how it kind of pieced out compared to what you talked about as best practices. So, I mean, it was definitely something I was very mindful of in regards to, like I said, wherever the gut pouch had been and wherever they'd split. But it was a slightly different process. And really, it was through the chest cavity. It wasn't through the front shoulder that it popped out. So it meant that essentially I did take both front legs. It was pretty much the chest, the whole chest cavity got left for dog meat, essentially. And the dog meat for the farmer. And everything else was taken, the neck and everything else. So, it was a similar process. There was just a little bit more meat that was taken. But that is very interesting because I had heard of people, and I think it does depend on where the shot goes as well. Like, if you were to take a shot through double lung, for instance, it doesn't do any damage to a gut pouch, for instance, and it's straight through a shoulder, are you then cutting around the entry and exit wounds?
Yeah, most certainly, yeah. And don't be a Scotsman about it. Just you're never gonna lose the argument if you take more than what you need.
Yep.
To get rid of it. You've got carbon fibres, you've got all of those things that are physical contaminants as well. You've got bone chips. You're not doing yourself any favour by being too frugal.
Yep.
So if you've got any bruising, like I've had those type of entry and exits through lungs and things like that, and there's there's blood splash all through the shoulder.
Yeah.
And if you've got bruising, it means that the pH hasn't reduced, and it means that there's been a place for pathogens to live. So don't ever keep bruised meat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very insightful. And so in regards to the big question that I love to ask actually, and I talked about this at the start, is pigs within Australia. If you've hunted a wild pig, obviously situational dependent, but say it's a fat looking hog, it's looking pretty decent. Is it something that you would eat, or are you completely against the wild pigs within Australia?
I think you'd have to be pretty well. I think anything. Look at food safety wise, they're safe.
Yeah.
Most any pig, if that piece of meat taken properly, is going to be safe.
Okay.
But it's a big but.
Yes.
You don't get half crook with trichinella.
Yeah.
You're going to get sick, and it can make you very sick. So you're best to know the environment that you're taking that pig out of.
Uh-huh.
You're best to know what they've been eating.
Yeah.
If they've been, I've seen pigs out on the downs here straight off grain as their main diet, and you'd be a fool not to take them. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And a young sow, off that thing, killed humanely, taken well, you won't eat better, I don't think.
Yeah.
But you've got to take that as a measure of knowing their environment that they've come out of, and generally, if you've got someone to look over your shoulder to do an inspection and just check that they are right, because we tend to those parasites like trichinella that live inside muscle tissue. If you're not familiar with them, you might not know what you're eating, like beef measles and things like that are quite obvious, but they might be inside your roast and rarely cooked meat. That's why it's very hard to justify eating that meat cookie. You've got to make sure it's cooked properly.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of complicating issues there, Matty. Not It's just not laissez-faire about it. You've gone up the food safety risk by 100-fold.
Yeah, definitely. And so trichinella, trichinella in general, you said it's a muscle-based.
It's part of its migratory path is into muscle tissue. Yeah,
compared to most of the other ones that we have to worry about in Australia being blood-based. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, they've all got a predilection for where they go to.
Yeah,
and that means a preferred site. So, hydatids will always end up around the lungs.
Okay.
That's why any of that's life cycle around, sheep and, and then foxes and cats and, those other predators, they've got a symbiotic relationship. They carry each other's young around. They all settle in the sheep's lungs or our lungs. Doesn't matter which one.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible illness. Almost hard to get someone through that. So it's just about making sure you've got good hygiene and looking after yourself. But hydatids are a good one. I suppose brucellosis lives in the lungs.
Yep.
There's a lot of things like that are going to cause you illness.
Yeah. Okay.
There's zoonotic diseases they carry from the animal you're hunting to you without too much hesitation.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't need another life cycle to go through. We can be an independent, an accidental host, if you like.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And that can be passed just through something like you said, just a cut in the finger or something when you're actually doing processing the meat. So if we were to go the other side and say, for instance, there was a piece of meat that was infected somehow, is there a process where you can kill it? So, for instance, if it's in the deep freeze and it's past a certain temperature or it goes to extreme heats, does it kill the bugs essentially?
Just about always, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't like being hot.
So really, the best process is if you've got meat and you're kind of unsure, it'd be to put it through a deep freeze and then make sure it's a well cooked piece of meat when you go to eat it.
Yeah, but look, if you're in that light, Matty, you wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be. It's a lot cheaper to go down to the butcher shop and get something that's that's reliable. Like if you're second guessing about whether something's going to be okay or not.
Yeah.
I think the takeout of this is don't muck with it because there's a very straight route to being crook, and sometimes when you get crook from these things, you get very crook. Anything that can take you away from bow hunting, you probably shouldn't be doing. So
yeah, exactly.
There's no. It's the most expensive bit of meat you saved ever if you get crook from it.
Yeah.
And that meal that you should have thrown out instead of trying to make it cold is the best step you made ever. One day crook in a camp is one day too many always,
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. And I think, well, realistically, we're kind of out of time, but I think that's probably a good place to leave it anyway. It's really being a bit more mindful. And like you said, don't be a Scotsman with it. Like, feel free to chuck away more than you need to. I think that's kind of very insightful. And I like that we've kind of split it into two pieces. It's about your regular food plus the harvesting food that you're getting. So I think that's been really insightful in general, Bevan. Thank you.
No problem at all, Matty. And thank you very much for thinking of food safety in the context of hunting. It's very important.
Yeah, definitely. So if people want to reach out to you or anything, Bev, do you have Instagram or are you just on Facebook or?
I don't do any of them real well, Matty. I reckon get back to Matty and he can pass the questions on. I reckon.
Okay, that works.
Be pleased to help, mate.
Easy. That works a treat. All right. Well, thanks heaps, Bev. Really appreciate your time.
Good on you, fella. I'll talk to you later, eh?
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll send those pickies through, bud.
Thanks, mate. See ya. That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bow Hunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you're enjoying the show or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast. And on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team. Fling some arrows. Get that practice in and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.